Okay, now this looks darkened. It might look a bit odd right now, but hopefully once we start putting on some highlights, you won't think too much about it. So I've mixed up highlight, and when I'm doing dry brushing, I don't use my wet palette, of course, because I don't want the paint to be wet. And I use one of these disposable paper plates, preferably one with a lot of wax on the surface, so it doesn't soak into the plate. And I've got a dry brush here. This is an Army Painter large dry brush. I like these because they're flat and they have different shapes to the tips, so they can be used in different ways. So I'm just gonna tip this a little bit in this mixed paint, and I'm wiping it off camera on a piece actually of on an old t-shirt till most of it is out, and we're just gonna lightly go across here and see what happens. This first mix was pretty close to the base mixture, so I can probably go in a bit heavier here. And I'm catching the raised areas, but I also want to get down into the valleys a little bit to help with the blending. Now the interesting thing about dry brushing as a technique for cloth is that it can help simulate texture a little bit, because the thing with dry brushing is it can leave streaks, but for cloth that's not necessarily such a bad thing, because cloth is not always perfectly smooth. It's often quite rough in texture, especially if it's like medieval cloth. And now you can tell from the way the cloak is moving here that I'm doing this first dry brush rather heavily with a heavy hand. I'm not going to do that in the following highlights. It's just because this is sort of a reapplication of the base coats, and I do want to cover a little bit of this shade layer. Oops. As a kind of now on the underside it's not so important. Oh, where was I? Oh yes. The brush strokes can kind of help simulate the texture of cloth. Now this is not entirely realistic, but you know, it's painting miniatures is not a really big on realism in any case. It's more impressionistic than anything else. That was a bit too light perhaps, but oh well. As I said, this is the underside, not going to matter much. The parts at the top here I'm probably gonna have to touch up after anyway, because there's no way I can avoid touching them. Anyway, let's do this in real time. Let's add a bit more khaki to this mix. Let's see what happens. That was quite a lot. Made it much lighter. So I need to scrub the brush out thoroughly. Let's test it on the underside first to see what it looks like. Yeah. If I just do a light dry brush of this, it's fine. See, this brings out the detail a bit more. Gives it a kind of dusty look, which I like. I think I'm, oops, that's a bit much, but oh well. Yeah, I gotta keep it in frame. This dry brushing especially here brings out the sort of roughness in the metal surface, the roughness in the cast. Which is good. I think for the next highlight, do I want to add more of the khaki? Well, let's see what happens if I add just a little bit more khaki. Let's stir with this. It would turn really, really brown. I think to lighten it, I'm just going to add a tiny amount of off-white. Make it paler. This is turning kind of gray, but that's fine. That's okay for the like the top highlights. It shows really faded cloth. I don't know if I need any more on the underside. I can just test it here to see what it looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good actually. And the edge here, the edge I can just sort of side brush. And this is just going on top ridges. Oops. It went on a bit heavy on this side, but we can fix that. We can have a bit more towards the bottom here. This is where the light would hit more. Well, light would hit most on these sharp folds at the top, but as you see, I'm rubbing those off anyway while I'm painting here, and that's not yeah. Let's do the bottom first. I'll do the bottom of the cloak here first. I'll seal that, and then I'll come back and fix the top portion of it. Do I need to do one more highlight? Let's add a bit more. And I see this episode might run a bit long in total, a bit more than 20 minutes, but it's worth it if I can finish the cloak, I think. Now we're sort of, it's not even gray, it's a pastel green. This is turning out rather well, I think. Just hitting the top here. I want bottom edges. And I'm going to switch to a brush, my size 0 brush here, and edge highlight these tiers and the bottom. And we're back, and I'm continuing the sort of edge highlight of these rips. bottom. And, you know, I think this is enough of a highlight. It's even pretty stark. That looks a bit better on the bottom. You know what? I'm gonna say this looks okay for the time being. So, well, maybe I'll dust it a little bit more to blend this in. Maybe one final with a lot of off-whites. One really, really pale highlight. And this is going to be barely touching. Now I'm holding the brush like at not down here but further up and just moving it like a feather duster, just to get a little bit of slightest bit of color transference here. And if it's patchy, that's okay, because cloth doesn't always wear evenly. It can have spots where, yeah. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to spray varnish the bottom half of this to protect it, so I can hold it by that and finish painting the upper portion. Do I need to do anything here? I'll go back to a previous highlight and just get the edges here so they're not and shiny. So you can see I've spray varnished with a gloss varnish the bottom part of it, so that I can handle it now without any risk of rubbing this paint off. So I've got to fix the upper portion here where lots of paint has been rubbed off. And I'm not in a rush now because by this time I've decided that this is going to be 2 videos in any case. So I have the time to fix this, and this probably doesn't need to be painted, but oh well. And I'm mixing stuff up here on my wet palette as I go. Just winging it. And what is, oh, this is some sort of, oh well. Have to figure out what is just a light shade and what is actually rubbed off paint. And oh, this is hair. I shouldn't be painting this green. Oh well, I'll paint that over anyway later. Let's do a paler mix here. We need, let's see how the light is hitting it. Yeah, this portion here is gonna be, and I should think about whether any of these highlights need to go on anything on the main figure. Just check real quick, because by now I've actually gone in and gloss coated the skin. as well. It's very shiny. I did this by hand with what's it called? The Games Workshop stuff. Let's see. And yeah. Oh, that part there needs some paint actually. Well, I'll fix that later. There's a little spot there that is not covered by the cloak. Well, actually, this thing here that comes down, that's a part of the cloak. Let's see what happens if I paint in this green. Now these round things are going to be some sort of metal clasps. But this part needs to be actually, what the heck, let's paint over those just to be done with it for now. And we'll highlight them slightly. Don't need to do any big highlights here. We can just kind of yeah, this is just temporary, just to remind myself what color that should be in the end. And yeah, put her to the side for the moment and go back to here. And yeah. I think that now I need to seal this portion as well, because this upper area here is just gonna get wrecked by touching it. And I'm trying to make this portion perfect. Perfection is eluding me. But yeah, we'll keep it like that for the moment. I don't want to take away the hair is probably going to be more dramatic and more of a focal point for here, up here anyway, so people aren't going to look too closely at the top side of the cloak. They might be, the bottom of the cloak might catch the eye more, probably, I assume, but still this upper, yeah, that looks good. Okay, let me fix that and I'll say some close. So now I've protected the top part as well. And I fixed that bit on the shoulder here and add some more varnish. So we have some progress. This is as far as we've gotten on this model. Next step, either the hair or the clothing. I'm kind of thinking the hair, but I'm not sure. Check back next video to see which one I chose to do first. Whichever I do first, I'll do the other one second. Either hair and then bikini, or bikini and then hair. And after that, leather. So, unlike the previous half of the cloak video, which I didn't sign off on because I didn't know it was going to be 2 parts, this one I know is ending right now. So, until next video, this is Dakian, signing off.